Okay. Yesterday, I was on a Zoom meeting with my consultant, and we were working on a particular project in Claude. And he's an AI expert and has been using it for years. And in that call, he mentioned how impressed he was with how I was working with Claude, the way I was prompting it and thinking through our session. And made me wonder if it was maybe something worth sharing with someone like you who might be a business owner or working on some kind of creative project. And I don't do this because it's not an ego thing or self-congratulatory. I think what impressed him wasn't so much my prompts, but something else. And I want to basically show you what that is. I think everyone is focused on trying to engineer the perfect prompt. And I think that's optimizing for the wrong thing. A prompt is just one turn, right? And it's kind of a vending machine approach. Put in a perfect input, get a perfect output, and then walk away. What I want to share with you is a different way of interacting with it. Think of yourself as being in the ring for a sparring session. You don't need the perfect question. You just need to react well over and over. And so I want to invite you in to my lab and invite you to kind of look over my shoulder, as it were. And I'm going to walk you through my chat session with it. Take 5 stops and pull out a couple of highlights. And I think this is going to be helpful for you in terms of how you interact with AI when you're working on your business or any particular project that you're creating at the moment to look at. And first thing I wanted to do, well, before I do, just to give you some context, I was working on a company identity stack. So there was going to be 3 elements to this: the company identity line, the company tagline, and a narrative. And this is for that. This is a kind of infrastructure I'm building on top of an AI course or program to teach other business owners how to run their business on Claude Cowork. That's a specific product that I've been developing, but this is kind of a broader, higher level session that we were having to establish, the company identity. And so I gave it kind of a basic prompt to start, just told it that, hey, I'm setting up a B2B business. And it came back with 3 possibilities of what type of company this is and wanted me to pick which one I'm building to clarify. And I had told it that, the second and the third option that it came up with fits what I was doing, but I had to kind of push back on number 3 because it turned out later in the session that it was thinking of a company that provides services to ed tech companies. And I wanted to clarify that this was going to be something that was going to be one-on-one or group-based coaching and consulting to individuals. And so the idea here is it provides you a menu. Sometimes, you've seen this before where it'll give you a list of some things to consider. And instead of just picking from the items on the menu, I went ahead and redrew the menu and forced it to just kind of rethink how it was presenting me those options. So kind of takeaway for you is don't just limit yourself to the options that it provides, and give some further context where you need it to add that. The next stop we'll take is further down in the session where I dropped in a file for context. So this was a file that I was running in Cowork. It was as I was meeting with coaches over the last couple of weeks, doing some market research through some discovery calls. I was saving the transcripts, throwing it into a folder. And with each transcript, Cowork would run a summary and analysis and basically pull out some of the key highlights for this project, pain points, things they were struggling with, how they're spending their day, how they're using AI currently. So that's kind of the gist of that. And the point here to highlight is that I didn't, in this case, didn't front load everything, but I fed the context at the point in the conversation when Claude was ready for it. And it definitely re-aimed the whole direction of the conversation, gave it a layer of knowledge and background context to really shape how it was thinking about the project and interacting with me on it. So the point here is context is a tool. It's not a data dump. And so this is a live conversation. Remember, it's just like talking with a real human being, and you want to think about where to drop that context when it makes sense. The next thing I want to point out was a little further down towards the end of the session where we had spent some time talking about names for the company, potential names, and I gave it some instruction, and the conversation started to kind of go down a direction of picking out a non-personal name. But then I fed it an idea that I got from my consultant and asked it what it thought about the name. And it pushed back on me, which was really important and valuable because we know that it has a bias towards kind of a sycophancy, towards agreeing with you and reaffirming whatever you say. But, and this is part of kind of global instructions that I had built into Claude. I told it to disagree with me, and I've trained it to, and not just in a reflexive way, but to thoughtfully point out where my logic sometimes goes awry, where I'm saying things that are contradictory. So its default is to flatter, but I've given it that instruction to push back where it's needed within the context of what I'm trying to accomplish. And that way, it, instead of leading me down a path following a bad idea, it gives me an opportunity to walk it back and change course. So make sure that you include some kind of training with it. I would say at the global level to push back where it needs to, so that you're getting, and it gets at that kind of sparring idea of you want to come up with the best idea and stress test what you're thinking. So the other thing, that was a third stop. The fourth stop out of the five here has to do with the hierarchy that I gave it in terms of what we were building out. Basically told it that there was three levels. There's the identity line, the tagline, and the narrative. And so that having that hierarchy was valuable, and it knew that it was going to be working through that. The important point there was that I didn't let those blur. I gave it the hierarchy at first and said, hey, this is going to be the order that we're going to work through it, but we're going to take it one step at a time. And once we kind of reach a point where we've come up with, say, the identity line and we've gotten that locked in, then we can set that aside and move to the next layer. And so that, that discipline throughout the conversation helps you to iterate and build a trajectory that's heading in a good direction where you're going to get an output that you're happy with. So gave it the instructions, didn't let it blur the lines, and whenever it drifted, you pull it back on track with the structure that you've laid out in terms of how you're thinking through what you're doing. And then the final piece has to do with the names. As we were just kind of looking at the various names and coming up with suggestions and ideas, it made sure to do a trademark check to make sure that, hey, there weren't going to be any issues with the names that we were brainstorming. And so that point there is just do that work so that you don't have to undo everything. You can kind of have it run that quick check as you're in process brainstorming, so that you don't, pick a name and then find out that you have to go back and kind of rethink everything. So those were five things that I wanted to just kind of pull out and highlight from that. Notice the order: redraw, feed, challenge, hold, and verify. Those are the kind of the key elements of the session, and the rigor compounded as we progress through the chat. So in my mastermind, recently we were looking at our DISC personality profiles. And for me, I am a clear high C, not mixed with anything else. That makes me someone who's skeptical, structured, precise about words. That is the kind of thinker, scientist, analytical person, overthinker, even to the point of analysis paralysis. And as I was thinking about the chat session and also just how I generally use Claude, I realized that I think that's a natural advantage there. In other settings, it can be a disadvantage. In meetings, working with colleagues, working with clients, it can be a challenge communicating with other personality types in that setting. But I think it really comes out and shines here, and it allows you to really take advantage of it in ways that other people, I think, will not be able to do, at least as quickly or as naturally. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have another personality type that is, you're not going to be able to take advantage of it. But because skepticism, structure, precision, those are behaviors that you can learn. But just like how you have to kind of calibrate your communication with real live human beings of other personality types, you can do the same thing with Claude and train it based on what you know about your personality type, how you think about problems, how you talk things out, how you communicate and process information. If you have a good sense of that, and especially if you have a good, personality profile, whether it's disc or something else, you can feed that into Claude and train it and say, hey, here's what I'm like. And let's, you know, prompt it to understand that and take that into consideration as it's interacting with you. And you can build that into your global instructions and build that into any particular prompt that you're working on. So that way you're not having to kind of go against the grain as you're using it, because it's not, again, it's just a tool. And it comes down to how you use it. So it's not pre-built to work against you. It's just that you have to think about the design and the structure of it so that it's working in your favor. So this is just one project. It's still live and ongoing, unfinished. But I think if this way of working is interesting to you, stick around. I'm going to actually record another video after this. And if I get it done, I'll put the card up here so that you can check out how to prompt or fill out your global instructions for chat or Claude or whatever you're using. Something, if you haven't thought about it, I'm not surprised, because I haven't either. I've been using it for a while, but I've never really put much thought into how should I train it across all of my chats to behave with me so that I'm avoiding the biases, avoiding the potential for hallucination, and keeping myself structured and organized. And so I'll record a video showing you what that looks like, what I put in, and it'll show you how you can build out a unique set of instructions for you. I'll drop a link also where I'm sharing tips like this, where I'm dropping what I learn as I go, get the mistakes, hear how it's going in real time. And I'll drop a link there in the description below. So hopefully you enjoyed this and found this helpful. Thanks.